Alright guys, welcome back to the shop. So it's going to be a little bit of a shorter day and we got to fix all the mistakes from yesterday still. So we got to go through, recut our ends on our second side rail, return all of those dowels that are going to go into the other three sides, drill the holes, mount those dowels in, and get the legs all fitted up. All I want to get done today, my only hope for the day is that I can get the legs all fitted up. If I can get anything else done today, I will be more than happy. But if I can at least get the legs mounted onto the side rails, that way we can actually get onto the finishing stages of the side rails and get onto the gluing up the headboard and footboard, all that kind of stuff. Once we have this part done, the rest of this becomes a lot easier, because once we get these legs done, that means we can actually, get moving on with this project. Because until we have the legs fit up, we can't start gluing up the headboard, the footboard, we can't do our finishing work on the headboard and footboard, we can't do our finishing work on the side rails. So all of that stuff is kind of tied around doing these legs. So as you guys can tell, I'm in a much better mood than I was at the end of yesterday's video. That was a pretty rough time. I don't hate the track saw. I want to make that very clear. It seemed like in that video that I was really mad at the track saw. I'm going to chalk most of that up to user error. I was actually doing a little bit of research last night while I was waiting for the video to export, and I found this whole blog post, this whole article about using a track saw for doing what I'm doing here. Because a track saw is designed mainly to work with things like plywood. They're not specifically designed for working with 8-quarter hard maple. It's kind of like getting my Ford Ranger to tow a giant RV. You could do it, it's just not particularly what it's meant for. So the fact that I'm using this saw in a way that it's not particularly designed for, I'm not surprised that I'm noticing some issues here and there. So overall, again, I just want to make that very clear. At the end of yesterday's video, it seemed like I was just done. I was ready to sell this Makita track saw and throw it in the garbage. That's not at all the case. I still love that tool. It's still a really good quality tool, I think. So we're just going to jump into it. Luckily, I know everything that needs to be done, and I just have to do it. So it's a nice process-heavy thing. So we're just going to go for it, get all these parts fitted up, and get our legs finally attached. Okay, so at the risk of this sounding like an ad, I want to show you guys something I really appreciate about this Rikon drill press, and that is the RPM meter on the top here. So you can see here when I have it running, I have it currently set to around 500 RPM. So we're at right around 550 right now. So as I'm cutting, if I see that number start to drop, I know that I'm bogging down the machine and I just have to lighten up my cut. Because the Forstner bit that I'm using right now is not as sharp as it probably should be. Plus we're cutting into hard maple and we're cutting pretty deep too. All those things combined with a Forstner bit just means that you're going to build up a lot of heat and you got to go a little bit slower and apply a lot less pressure than you normally would. So the nice thing is that as soon as I see the numbers start dropping down, I see it go down to like 480, 450, I know right there that I'm bogging down the machine. And I know to just loosen up the amount of pressure I'm putting in or fully back the bit out of the cut. So if you don't have a drill press that has an RPM meter on it like this Rikon does, I would highly recommend looking into it if you're looking for an upgrade. Obviously, that's not a feature that, it's worth fully changing out your drill press for, but it's one of those things to keep in mind for sure. And, it's a really nice feature to have because not only can you dial in the RPMs of, whatever bit you're working with, which I've found is actually really important, but it also lets you know how you're treating your machine and gives you a good sign as to whether or not you're bogging down the machine or if you're actually using your bit at the proper speed that it's designed to be used at. So that's just a little tidbit of advice I thought was important as I'm standing here drilling these holes for these pieces. As having that RPM meter on your drill press is really, really handy. Okay, so we've got all of our lag pieces fitting up onto our floating tenons and everything is looking good. Now saying that there are some small gaps, mostly in the straight section here where the track saw did whatever the track saw I was going to do. There's nothing I can do about it. But what we're going to do to kind of hide that is just add a round over on this inside edge of the side rail, and that should kind of camouflage that gap just enough. So you can see exactly what kind of fit I'm going for. I can very easily just slide this piece on and off, but it doesn't have any wiggle room to it. It's nice and tight on there, and once we add in that bed bolt, it'll lock this piece completely in place. We don't have to worry about it moving around, coming off, anything like that, and it's still going to be a very solid connection. But to take it off, it just slides right off. And the reason I'm going for this loose of a fit is purely because I don't want there to be any resistance when you're trying to put this thing together. Our side rails weigh probably 50 pounds. The headboard alone is going to probably weigh 60 or 70 pounds. All around, this stuff is very heavy and not something you want to kind of be fumbling around with as you're trying to put it all together. And I really don't want to take a 4-man team to put the whole bed frame together. So one thing I forgot to mention beforehand is that I offset the holes on our leg pieces 3/16 of an inch. So what that does is that leaves me with a nice 3/16 reveal that we're then going to add a 1/8 round over to create our step design. Now the beauty of this is it means to do our step design, we don't have to change anything in our side rails. They just are how they are. Again, there's not really any way I could go back in and change them. So just by adding in that offset to our side rails here, it just makes life a lot easier. But now the next thing we need to do is add in our bed bolts. And this should be pretty easy. It's all just about measuring and marking things out fairly accurately and taking the time to drill things somewhat accurately. So yeah, it's gonna be an interesting process because we're using the different style of bed bolts this time, where we have the little barrel nut that is actually gonna go into our workpiece here. So overall, it should be a much simpler process than what we did last time. Okay, so I should really learn my lesson and record the first time I do something. I knew that there was going to be a lot of concentration, a lot of figuring things out involved in getting this barrel bolt installed, and so I was going to do this first one off camera. So I decided I don't need to record anything. I'll figure it out, and then I'll show footage of the rest of them. But literally everything that could go wrong has gone wrong again. The bolt was measuring as being as straight as I could possibly measure it with my square here. So I went ahead and I drilled the hole on the same axis as I thought the bolt was taking. That was very much so the wrong way to do it. And so I now have drilled a 5/8 hole into our side rail here, and our barrel bolt and our bolt do not line up whatsoever. At the same time, I was using my socket here to apply some pressure at the back of the bolt to try and help drive it into the nut, because I thought maybe it just needs a little bit of pressure there. And when I tried to take the socket off, it dropped and fell into the concrete and exploded into quite literally all of its components. So I think that I found everything. The only issue is I have this one component here that I'm pretty sure is part of the whole ratcheting part of this system, and I don't know where it goes. I'm also missing one of the screws that actually holds the front faceplate on. Anyway, as for our bed bolts, my only hope here is to widen the hole that the bolt is in and just see if I can get that to line up. Okay, so I thought of a solution here. So the only option here is to fill it. Now, luckily, before I jumped in with epoxy, I thought about, if I start to fill this thing, the epoxy is just going to drain out that hole that we have drilled in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a small section of dowel, just a, very, like maybe a 1/2 inch or 1 inch section. Then before we put the epoxy in, we'll just use the bolt itself to just push that small piece of dowel to just block up that hole as best as I can. That way I can fill this hole with some epoxy. So luckily it's going to be a couple days before I can come back and deal with this again. So it should be just fine. It should be fully hardened up by the time we get back to doing it. And yeah, I'm just going to let it sit here, harden up, and then we'll re-drill that hole, re-drill all of our other holes, and then hopefully from there we can move on and hopefully get these legs done. So far, everything that could go wrong has gone wrong when it comes to attaching these side rails to the legs. I'm really just kind of getting sick of it, but hopefully we'll be able to get it done soon enough. Again, every day closer and closer to that finish line. So I do hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.